Hey, everybody, it's Everett with Ohio for Freedom. I'm coming on here with part one of the P. Diddy Prophecies. Now, that might need a little bit of explanation. I'm planning to do at least 2 episodes on this. And here's why. You may be wondering, how did you go from being the guy in makeshift sackcloth and ashes talking about 40 days of prayer in the interval between the eclipse and Pentecost? How did you go from that to talking about P. Diddy? Folks, I got to tell you something. This is so explosive, and this needs to be prayed over. This needs to be prayed over because remember how when Jeffrey Epstein came up suspiciously deceased while incarcerated, and the trial for Ghislaine Maxwell seemed to be delayed and delayed and delayed. And it has always seemed like there's a whole lot of information that still has never come out that could be very damaging to the powers that shouldn't be. All of that can be said about this case right here because P. Diddy had cameras all over his residences, his multiple places of residence. He had cameras on the yacht. And folks, this involves people in the hip hop industry, but this involves politicians, this involves preachers, and the FBI, Homeland Security, whoever was involved in that arrest and the raid, they've got the goods. And here's the danger. Here's the danger. I do not want Little Rod, the gentleman that brought the lawsuit, I do not want him to settle out of court. This thing needs to go all the way through. And I'm telling you, this information really needs to get out to the rank and file, and it needs to be prayed over because we need complete and total exposure over this. And I'm going to share a brief little anecdote, and then we're going to get into some prepared video for the program tonight. Because what I'm going to do, I'll just let the cat out of the bag. I pre-recorded a walkthrough of the actual lawsuit, and it goes pretty fast, but it still takes a while. And I'm getting that out there just to lay a foundation. I want rank and file people to know what's in this lawsuit. And most people are not going to, you can go to ohioforfreedom.com, you can download it, you can read it. Most people are just not going to have the time or take the time or whatever to do that. But if you can just listen for a little bit, now it's unsettling, but this is what's happening. And this is what our children and our young adults are being hit with. And here's another thing that I'll touch on. I'm not a hip hopper. I don't know these people. I would not know a Diddy song or a Beyonce song or a Justin Bieber song. And see, I'm running out of names. I don't know these people. If the song came up and bit me on the nose, I wouldn't know who it was. I wouldn't know the lyrics. I wouldn't know the title. And that's part of the problem because frankly, a lot of people are reporting on this. There's tons of videos on YouTube. There's tons of videos that are on Twitter or commentary on Twitter. But as I'm looking at this and I feel drawn to take a look and spend some time with it, this is all still, in my opinion, within the echo chamber. And most of the people talking about this, the videos kind of have a similar flavor. It almost comes across like a gossip tabloid commentary. And there's similar formats, a lot of careful, slick, cool editing and the cool music underneath. But everybody that I have heard so far comment is kind of within that hip hop world echo chamber, and they're very sympathetic to hip hop. And I understand that. However, stepping back and looking, I'm just going to let the cat out of the bag. I think this whole entertainment industry idol needs to fall. In fact, I believe that's the Lord's intent. I believe that the Lord wants to blow the lid wide open on the dynamics that are represented in this lawsuit. And I believe at the same time, those same dynamics, the entrapment and the grooming and all of the rest, it's hip hop, it's the whole entertainment industry, it's other genres of music, but it's our politics and it's so much more. And so on a second episode, we're going to get into the preachers involved. We're going to get into the funding involved. We're going to get into more of the powers that shouldn't be. that are involved, but I just want to get the basic facts of the case out there. And so that's going to be tonight's program. I'm going to play some video. I am going to interrupt twice for a couple of sponsor promos. And I'll just take the time to say, folks, we're fighting for our life financially for the expansion of this channel and to overcome the censorship. If you're able to go to ohioforfreedom.com and hit our PayPal, or I think we have a Cash App up there, anything that you can do to help would be greatly appreciated. I see a few people, and I'm going to share one more story real quick. I've had an experience in the last 12 months that has just, for myself personally, gone deeper than anything that I've experienced before. And that is when President Trump was arraigned by Funny Fannie Willis. I woke up in prayer in the spirit about 2 days later, and I did a live. It's since been taken down, but I felt impressed to ask the people to pray for protection for President Trump and no false flags, but to pray for angels of exposure. I was quick to say, I'm not saying there's an angel named exposure, but the ministry of exposure. And I haven't talked about this much, but I mean, days and days I would go and pray over that. And I have just watched that unfold, and all of this that has come out with all the shenanigans there in Fulton County, Georgia. And I believe that's the same thing that needs to happen with this case, because this case has the potential to really knock some principalities and powers off of the throne that they think they sit on. So without further ado, I'm going to get into some pre-prepared video, and here we go. And so let's get over there. This is the opening page of the lawsuit, and you see that the plaintiff is Rodney Jones. We'll call him Little Rod. The defendants would be Sean Combs, that'd be Diddy, his son Justin Dior Combs, Ethiopia Habtemariam, she's the CEO, former CEO of Motown Records, Lucian Charles Grange, kind of a record exec, music industry kingpin, kingmaker, Christine Coram. She is the chief of staff for Combs. You might call her the Ghislaine Maxwell of this entire scenario. Chalice Recording Studios, Love Records, Motown Records, Universal Music Group, Combs Global Enterprises, and then John and Jane Doe's 1 through 10, and ABC Corporations 1 through 10. Have you ever seen this in a lawsuit before? Trigger warning. Document contains highly graphic information of a sexual nature, including sexual assault, graphic images of the aftermath of a shooting, images of sexual intercourse, redacted images of minors, sex workers, prostitutes, details of sex trafficking, and the illegal distribution of guns and drugs. So it establishes the jurisdiction and so forth, and a lot of screenshots in this lawsuit. Lots of screenshots, and you see the various logos for the parties involved. This one I just found creepy. This is the logo for Combs Global, the C imposed over the G. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I can see 666 in that. I mean, I can think of a lot of different ways you could have organized that logo, but let's get into the lawsuit itself. So the person, the plaintiff bringing the lawsuit is Little Rodney Jones from Chicago. It gives you a little bit of his history. He comes from a large family, a gospel family, grew up in the church. At age 5, started playing musical instruments, playing drums, has taught himself 13 instruments, has had some success in music production. He's kind of a prodigy. And he's produced, these sound like regional people to me: Georgia Mass Choir, Donald Lawrence, the Clark Sisters, Smokey Norfolk. Not familiar with those people, but he's had his hand in that. And then I'm going to give my take. My take on Little Rod is that this guy's probably got a lot of talent. He's probably the real deal. There's probably a real anointing on his life, a calling from God on his life. And he was just getting started, got hopes and dreams and aspirations, and wanted to kind of branch out. And he had something probably real and organic that Combs, Diddy, doesn't have, or at least doesn't have anymore. But as the lawsuit progresses, we're on page 7. About August of 2022, Jones received a call from Combs, requesting that he produce several songs on an upcoming album that would be entitled the Love Album, Off the Grid. And item number 22 on page 7, it tells us that from September of 2022 to November of 2023, Little Rod produced 9 songs on Combs' album, and that he lived with him for months at a time, spending holidays, birthdays, missing major family events. He was basically a slave, folks. And this included residing with Combs in Los Angeles, New York, Miami, and on a yacht in the Virgin Islands. And throughout the time, he witnessed, experienced, and endured things that went far beyond his role as a producer. Item 27. Mr. Jones required, or Combs, Diddy required Jones to record him constantly. On several occasions, Mr. Combs took Mr. Jones' cell phone and been recording himself. As a result, Jones has secured hundreds, that's all in caps and in bold, of hours of footage and audio recordings of Combs, his staff, his guests engaging in serious illegal activity. And it includes the acquisition, use, and distribution of ecstasy, cocaine, GHB, that's the date rape drug, ketamine, marijuana, and mushrooms, and the display and distribution of unregistered firearms. Also providing laced alcoholic beverages to minors and sex workers at his various homes. And that his chief of staff, Christina Coram, instructing her staff to retrieve drugs so she can provide it to Mr. Combs for his consumption. Mr. Combs drugging and sexually assaulting a woman. Mr. Combs detailing how he planned to leverage his relationship with Bishop T.D. Jakes to soften the impact on his public image of a previous lawsuit brought by Cassie Ventura. Young Miami's cousin sexually assaulting Jones. Cuba Gooding sexually and assaulting Mr. Jones, and then a rapper whose name is redacted on Combs' yacht, consorting with underage girls, sex workers, and another rapper whose name is redacted in Mr. Combs' Los Angeles homes, consorting with underage girls and sex workers. So we're going to get into the first allegation, and this is really, really serious. And I just want to say this happens in the first month that Little Rod is working with, not being paid, but working with Mr. Combs. And this is really, really traumatic. So this is the Chalice Recording Studios shooting. So on or about September 12th, so this is barely a month in, maybe a couple of weeks in, Diddy held a writer's camp and producer's camp at Chalice Recording Studio in Los Angeles. Now, present were Combs, his son Justin Combs, and Mr. G, a friend of Justin's, who's a 30-year-old tall African-American male. And as you read through that, what you find out is that a heated discussion, a fight broke out between Diddy and his son and G. They take the discussion into the restroom and continue the heated disagreement, whatever it was, and all of a sudden shots ring out. And Little Rod is very close in proximity to that restroom. Hears shots ring out, the door flings open, Combs comes out, his son comes out, and they basically flee to another part of the building after instructing everybody to maintain the cover story that they were nowhere near when it happened. Now, nobody's helping G, who is in the restroom, laying down, bleeding from the hip and pelvic area, holding on to his abdomen. And as we read through, what we find out is that Little Rod goes in to check on this guy. Nobody's helping. And so he picks him up, seats him on top of the toilet, and he finds out he's not only bleeding from his thigh area, he's also bleeding from his abdomen. And nobody's helping. So he carries the G out to the street after he called the ambulance, and the everybody went with the cover story. And this is really interesting because the police completely bought it. And the story that they concocted was that Combs, Diddy, and his son were nowhere nearby. And this just happened to be a random drive-by shooting that just happened to happen at the same time they were having this producers and writers party. And the local media went with it. And there's a screenshot of the local CBS News affiliate going with that. The only problem is, here's a screenshot of what the bathroom looked like. And According to Little Rod, the police were there for 2 to 3 hours and they saw this. You see blood on the toilet seat. You see that trash can with paper towels that have blood all over them. You see blood on the floor. And the amazing thing is that no charges were filed, no arrests were made. How does that happen? Well, it would certainly seem to indicate that the LAPD is very corrupt. Now we're looking at next item. Mr. Jones sexually harassed and assaulted by Mr. Combs, Diddy. And as you read through this part of the lawsuit, throughout his time, Jones was the victim of constant, unsolicited, and authorized groping and touching of his, gosh, I don't want to say the word anus, but I'm going to say it because it's in the lawsuit. So you have Diddy constantly groping Jones in the crotch area. And it says on item 56, as a heterosexual Christian man, Jones was uncomfortable with Combs' advances and expressed his discomfort to Chief of Staff, KK, Christina Coram, and she responded with, well, you know, Sean will be Sean. She also attempted to downplay his groping of Jones' anus and genitals as friendly horseplay, stating that those were acts where Mr. Combs, Diddy's ways of showing he likes you. And get this, despite these assurances, on several occasions, Combs began to undress and walk around his house naked. And this same KK would say, oh, okay, I'm leaving now. And it also says that Combs, Diddy, forced Jones to work for him in his personal bathroom. And so he would be having conversations with Jones and he'd be showering in a clear glass shower, walking around stark buck naked. It reminds you of LBJ, who would degrade his associates by forcing them to have conversations with him while he was literally defecating. And this is just crude, really, really, really sick behavior. But let's
Yeah, and folks, believe it or not, it gets worse than that. And we're going to take just about, I think it's 88 seconds for a quick commercial break, and then we'll get right back in.
Would like to say hello to our newest sponsor, Dan's Quality Concrete. If you are in the greater Cincinnati area and you need concrete work done and done right, you need to call your man Dan at Dan's Quality Concrete. Patios, driveways, or maybe you need a parking lot for your church or business, Dan's Quality Concrete is the call you want to make. Dan has been doing quality work in the Cincinnati area, including the decorative sculpted work, for more than 20 years. Lots of happy campers, lots of references. In fact, Dan is often the one who gets the call to fix what the other guy didn't get right the first time. But that doesn't have to be you. Get it right the first time. Call Dan's Quality Concrete. Visit dansqualityconcrete.com. Then call the Ohio for Freedom sponsor line at 513-620-5754 to set up a free, no-obligation consultation. Oh, and since the schedule is filling up so fast as spring gets underway, be sure to ask about the Saturday install discount and save. For quality concrete done right the first time, it's Dan's Quality Concrete, 513-620-5754. Call today.
Hey, Josh, I appreciate those kind words, and that's what we're trying to do is hard work. So if you can go to Ohio for Freedom and hit my PayPal for just a little bit, it'd certainly be appreciated. And I want to say hi to Cheryl. She had a comment. These people, yeah, and Cheryl, believe it or not, now listen, I think I'm able to keep it so that it's a little bit kid-friendly in the description, but believe it or not, it gets worse. But it paints a complete picture. And I just want to say this. I want to get back into the pre-record. But folks, I'm telling you, this involves the FBI. I'll elaborate that on a second episode. It probably involves the CIA, the Department of Homeland Security. Now, they made these arrests, but see, once they make these arrests, they have the ability to keep all of this stuff under wraps. But then there's also connections, believe it or not, to BlackRock, because they own these record companies, Vanguard, all the rest. Folks, there's a TD Jakes connection that we have to get into. There's a Cuba Gooding connection that you're gonna see in just a little bit. And then there's evidence to suggest that some of the people captured on
on these videos that Diddy has politicians. So, I mean, I'm telling you, we cannot let this get suppressed. So in the comments, please weigh in. I'd be curious as to your reaction. How out there is this? What is the general and just Joe public, Joe average, Jane average out there? Do people really realize what's going on with this? I'd be very curious to get your comments on that, but we're going to get back into it right now. Let's move to the next thing, and here it is. It does get worse. It does get worse. Mr. Combs attempted to groom Lil Rod into engaging in gay sex. So there was a producer that was involved in this project whose name is Stephen Aaron Jordan, goes by Stevie J. I am not familiar with these people. And Combs, Diddy, knew that Little Rod really looked up to and admired Stevie J. So what he did was used and this is the allegation, is that Little Rod said he was trying to groom him to become comfortable with homosexual sex. So what did he do? He produced a video that he proceeded to show to Little Rod that had Stevie J engaging in homosexual sex. I really don't want to use I don't like saying those words. I don't like saying penetrating and anyway, unprotected homosexual sex. And so the lawsuit includes screenshots. Now, we'll just, Gene Deal, former bodyguard, says that it's possible that these screenshots were of somebody else that looked like Stevie J, but if Combs had shown that to Little Rod, he would have believed that it was Stevie J. So it was very coercive. We're going on to the next item, Thanksgiving of 2022. So see, this is just a few months in. So let me just real quick. I don't want to give too much commentary because we have stuff at the end, but not even a month into his interaction with Diddy is that horrible shooting. And we're going to get to this, but you think that wouldn't be frightening? So anybody that say, well, why didn't you just up and leave? You just saw this guy cover up a murder. I mean, or a shooting. You had three guys in there. Combs and Combs Jr. walk out. Everybody is scot-free. There's no charges filed. There's no arrests made. And if you think that's going to make you feel comfortable just splitting the scene, I think you might want to rethink that. So that's early on. And then a short time later, he's experiencing all these unwanted advances from Diddy. And Diddy is showing him these nasty videos to make him comfortable with homosexual sex. Hey, that's just what goes on in the music industry. Get over it. So this brings us up to Thanksgiving of 2022. So we're just a couple of months in, from September to November. And Mr. Combs is attempting item number 75. He's intoxicated and he's offering cocaine to Jones. Jones rejects him. While using the restroom, young Miami's cousin, she's just a kind of a random female that hung out with him, burst into the bathroom and began groping Mr. Jones. And I'm not going to read this, but she throws herself at him. He rejects her advances. And after he leaves the restroom, she undresses and tries to engage in extremely lewd behavior in front of them all. And once again, the lawsuit provides receipts. So these are screenshots, but these are screenshots of video. Video's a big deal because Combs, Diddy, had cameras all over this house too. Now, what you're looking at here are not those camera captures. These are this stuff is in Jones' own possession as stated in the lawsuit. So now we move to item number next, Trafficking and Victims Protection Act. Throughout his time with Combs, Mr. Jones, Little Rod, was transported from California to New York, Florida, and the Virgin Islands. During this time, Jones was forced to solicit sex workers and perform sex to the pleasure of Combs. Now, there was drugs involved in that. We're gonna deal with Little Rod at the end of this, but what you find out is that regularly Jones had to pick up the phone at the direction of Combs and had to arrange for sex workers to show up at his crazy parties. And item number 84, Mr. Jones, that'd be Little Rod, believes Diddy drugged him He recalls waking up naked, dizzy, and confused. He was in bed with 2 sex workers and, oh my gosh, and and Diddy. He also recalls aimlessly wandering around the house with no clothes on. This is really kind of hard to read, but we're going to get through this. And then this next item is basically the same thing happening all over again in another location in Miami, Florida. And so they're kind of as a pattern. Diddy was always high, but he would try to get Jones high, and then he would ultimately. It always seems like the aim that Diddy had was to engage in homosexual sex with Little Rod, and Little Rod wasn't going to have any part of it. And he would force him to pick up the phone call to get these escorts, these sex workers over there, slip him some drugs, and try to move it from interaction with females to interaction with other males. And I'm just moving through the lawsuit. That's all that I'm doing here. Okay, so here's another example, booby trap on the river. And so Combs made Jones take an exclusive bad boy that was his previous label, I believe, Diddy's previous label, baseball cap, and required him to wear it to the booby trap on the river as a signal to any sex worker that Diddy was back in town, and they seemed to have familiar with him. So, but Jones, they repeatedly say that he didn't want to have anything to do with it, but there was a lot of pressure that Diddy put on him. And so these are Instagram shots, not going to dwell on that, from some of the sex workers. This is a phone number from a regular contact sex worker that Diddy provided to Jones. And so there you go. Let's move to the next one. Now, this is getting even more dark and even more damning. Combs, that'd be Diddy, and Jay Combs, that'd be Diddy's son, Justin, solicits drugs and engages in illicit sex acts with minors and sex workers. So now,
so we're going to pop in with just our second and last commercial break. And I hope you have hand sanitizer for the brain and for the spirit.
Check out our new sponsor, Miami Valley Restorations. If you are in the greater Cincinnati-Dayton area and looking to give your kitchen or bathroom a complete makeover, you need to give Chris a call at Miami Valley Restorations. Look, after you settle on quality cabinets, fixtures, flooring, lighting, and more, after you are confident that the job will be done right, on time, and that your contractor will treat your home as their own while the project is underway, doesn't it come down to a fair price? Miami Valley Restoration specializes in delivering the highest quality, most professional service, timeliness of completion with pricing you can afford. Cut to the chase. Call Chris on the Ohio for Freedom sponsor line, 513-620-5754. Set up a no obligation, no dog and pony show consultation to find out what it will take to make your dreams for your home come true. At Miami Valley Restorations, you get the quality you deserve at a price you can afford. Call 513-620-5754. Call today.
Well, Cheryl, I appreciate that you are a prolific commentator tonight. By the way, folks, hit the share button, share. And I just want to get back into it, but this is Cheryl's last comment. This should be on the news, ! But we know why that's not happening. And so, Cheryl, I don't want to spend a lot of time, but I'll say, I saw this happen. I believe the Lord wanted to teach me, and I wasn't the only one, but the prayer for angels involved in the ministry of exposure, my goodness, that's angels want to be licensed by our words. I won't get into a whole lot of that. Listen, this story needs to jump out of the channel. The mainstream media is barely touching on it. And then on the social media side, once again, my perception is it's kind of within that hip hop echo chamber, and it's got to bust out. Mainstream America needs to know what's going on, because once again, it ain't just about Diddy. It ain't just about hip hop. It's about the whole of the music industry, the entertainment industry, our politics, the involvement with churches and so forth. There's even a prison industry connection, but we're going to get back into it. And here we go. Now, I think this is important. This happens on the 2nd of July, 2023. So this is less than a year ago.
and it's in California. Combs is having another one of these, Diddy's having another one of these listening parties where they invite people over, and present at this party, slow down, Everett, slow down. Present at this party was a R&B artist, and the name is redacted.
Probably Usher.
Combs Jr., that'd be Justin Combs, sex workers, and some underage girls. It began at 7 p.m. Diddy requested female sex workers and required Jones to solicit them. An hour later, several sex workers appeared. In addition to the sex workers, there were at least 5 women in the crowd that were under the age of 16. Combs forced all the women to drink laced De Leon liquor. Upon information and belief, Combs, that'd be Diddy, laced the liquor with ecstasy. And Combs did not check the identification of any of these underage girls. That made Little Rod very uncomfortable. And so we're going to take the time. These are screenshots. Combs with an underage female. That'd be Diddy with a child. Diddy with a child. This famous rapper, this famous hip hopper, whatever he does. I don't know any of his music. With a child. That's what you're looking at. In the center screen, another child. A sex worker on the right. And then at the bottom, you see Justin, that would be Diddy's son, with a underage female, that would be with a child. Mr. Combs, this is item number next, attempts to pass off Jones to Cuba Gooding Jr. Oh my gosh, this is hard for me because I've always been a huge Cuba Gooding fan. And folks, these people have talent, and the devil knows it. And he gets them right where he wants them to, it seems like sometimes. But anyway, Jones, that'd be Little Rod, believes that Combs was grooming him to pass him off to his friends. So if, let's just say, I wasn't going to talk in this section, but this is just coming to me. I want to talk about it. So Diddy saw something real and genuine in Little Rod, and from the very beginning wanted to, steal his talent, steal his abilities, and use them for his own purposes, but also seemed to want to corrupt Little Rod and pass him off to some of his friends. And one of his friends seems to be Cuba Gooding. And so this is on a yacht. And this is Little Rod interacting with Cuba Gooding in a makeshift studio on the yacht. And that was moments before he was assaulted. And then here is, and I'm going to take the time in the video to blow it up so it's real big. And goodness sakes, you clearly see Cuba Gooding assaulting, trying to come onto Little Rod. I will just tell anybody that's not sure, men don't interact with men that way. That is more than inappropriate. It is grotesque and it's sick. And it really hurts me to say, but that's Cuba Gooding. I ain't going to go see any more Cuba Gooding. I got to keep moving. Now, all these activities are taking place, and we've just looked at stuff. We've just looked at stuff that took place. The shooting happened within the first few weeks of his interaction with Diddy. Thanksgiving, he's assaulted by Young Miami's cousin, and on and so forth we go. And this that we just saw happened in July with the underage workers. That was in July of 2023. But throughout all of this time, and we'll rejoin the lawsuit, item 115, Jones was under an implied work for hire agreement. He was not compensated for his time. So see, this Little Rod never got any compensation for all this time and the work that he did. It says here that he produced a total of 9 songs, and I think it's listing the songs here. They failed to compensate him. And I may have to do a little bit of editing because I want to go back to something that, and I am doing this on the fly, but here's what I wanted to show you. This is one of the ways. This is how Diddy controlled Little Rod. He used many tactics. This is number 96. To maintain dominion and control of Jones, he promised him a Grammy for Producer of the Year for the Love album. So
Diddy is promising that he can get somebody a Grammy. That's really sick on a lot of different levels. He offered him $250,000 to purchase all the instruments that he wanted. He promised him ownership of his $20 million property for producing nine songs. But then item number 97, he would often switch up his approach. He would go from promising Jones the world to threatening Jones with physical harm. Combs threatened to eat Mr. Jones' face and informed Mr. Jones that he's willing to kill his mother, Janice Combs, if he must, in order to get what he wants. So I wanted to go back and make sure we caught that, because those are the ways that he's keeping him engaged. Those are the ways that he's controlling him. We're going to analyze this a little bit more, but you got a young, aspiring, talented individual, and he's being enticed with all of these bigger than life promises that were never going to happen. All this money and a Grammy, and plus introductions to movie or industry movers and shakers. So there's potentially all this upside that never happened, but then there would also be the threats. So let's get back to the lawsuit, and we may be close to finishing this portion of the video. Throughout his time, Jones was under an implied work for hire, and it lists the songs. But look at item number 121. Jones attempted to work with Combs to secure his publishing and royalty rights for the work he had completed. Combs only offered Mr. Jones, that'd be Little Rod, $29,000 for 13 months, thousands of hours of work, and 9 songs that made it to the Love album. Now, by this time, Jones seemed to be totally beaten down. He was willing to take $50,000, his publishing and royalties. Diddy's self-serving greed would not allow him to pay an additional $21,000. And so it tells us, I didn't realize that wasn't on the screen. It's on the screen now. I want to show you that the $50,000, $21,000. And so basically, after making this guy a slave and all this trauma, Diddy, the guy that's so famous, the guy that Barack Obama relied on to help deliver part of the black vote for both of his runs, wanted to have this guy on the hook 24/7, 14 months, 13 months, it says, $29,000 with no royalties, no publishing royalties. And when Little Rod got no response, he had to post some stuff on social media. And this is the backlash of some of his associates. This is DeForest Taylor threatening Mr. Jones. Okay, there's things I want to keep moving through. Gene Deal, if you find him on YouTube, former bodyguard, really starts spilling the beans on some of this. But let's get to this item and we'll be wrapping this up. Mr. Combs used his power and influence to threaten and intimidate Mr. Jones. Diddy didn't take no for an answer and would often threaten to inflict bodily harm on Little Rod if he didn't comply with his demands. And as an example, he references that Diddy had told Little Rod that a former shooting, I guess this goes clear back to 99, I could be wrong about that, but that at the time, Diddy had his girlfriend, Jennifer Lopez, carry a gun into a club for him, give it back to him once they got inside, and a death resulted. And this is the way that it was covered in the Chicago Tribune. And we're going to touch on this briefly. How did Diddy get out of all of this trouble? How did that shooting happen at Chalice Records and there were no arrests and there were no charges filed? Well, you might be looking at it right now. He has this gentleman, Fahim Muhammad, and Diddy instructed his staff always contact Mr. Muhammad if they're ever pulled over by the police in Miami or California upon information and belief. Muhammad had a lot of play with LAPD, and he spoke with LAPD after G was shot at the Chalice recording studios, and Jones had reason to believe. So anyway, this is the fixer guy. I just want to read number 138. The LAPD spent hours in CRS after the shooting of G, yet there were no arrests. So that's in there.
Jones witnessed the LAPD in the restroom pictured above, yet no arrests were made. So I had said that earlier. I just wanted to show you that it's in the lawsuits. Now, I want to really be able to wrap up here, but this is important. Defendants, Ethiopia Habtermanium, that's Motown, Lucian Charles Grange, Motown Records, Love Records, and Universal Group. They were part of a RICO enterprise because of the different states and localities involved. But what we're really getting into is, and I do think I can put a wrap on it with this. Look at 144. It's no secret that Diddy Combs had specific bottles of alcohol designated for females and other bottles designated for his staff. And as a sponsor of these events, Grange had a duty and obligation to ensure that sex workers and underage girls were not present, and that Diddy was not spiking the alcohol with date rate jugs. And then it even references in 146, the Art of the Dialogue program on YouTube, former bodyguard Gene Deal exposed Diddy's pill mixing method to spike cranberry juice and orange juice. So I'm going to put a wrap on this part of it by simply saying Diddy had a long history of these big parties where we'd have his associates acquire drugs for him, guns for them, and sex workers and underage females there. And it was a known practice that he would have alcohol there, but that some of the alcohol would be spiked with probably GHB and ecstasy and these other drugs. And everybody knew it, including the record industry bigwigs like this Lucian Grange character and this Ethiopia Habter of Motown. And so that makes them in on everything that this lawsuit alleges. We're going to take a short break.
Okay, we're gonna.
Well, 15 minutes to cover all this.
Here. Folks, I'm going to put a wrap on it. Before you go, if you're with me, type in the comments. Did you learn anything? Did you get any new details from this? I'd also be curious to see if you think the mainstream Joe Average knows this. And then I just want to close on this. Please pray for Rodney Jones, Little Rod, the young man that brought the case. And I just want to say to anybody that would be like, shame this young man. Well, why didn't you just get out of it? You could have just left. I'm going to just say, look, within the first couple of weeks, he saw somebody that was involved in a disagreement with the Combs father-son duo. And how did it end up for him? He got shot. He came that close to dying. He was shot in the abdomen, shot like in the thigh, and nothing happened. So you've got Little Rod, and you think if you're an aspiring musical talent and you get a call from a name this big in the industry, that you're not going to jump at the chance. I mean, it's totally understandable why he would think, man, this is a great opportunity. But within a couple of weeks, he sees what happens to people that get crosswise of the big Diddy and nothing happens. I would suggest to you that it wasn't that easy for him to walk away. And I'd also suggest to you that you need to pray for Little Rod, because he went through some stuff. And as a Christian, he's got stuff that has stained his spirit, but I just really applaud his courage. I applaud his bravery. And I would ask you to pray for his safety and pray for his resolve. And I would say, I'm praying, Little Rod, please do not settle this. Do not let this just get settled for an amount of money so that they can wrap everything up with these NDAs, these non-disclosure agreements, because, brother, maybe the Lord has called you for such a time as this. Maybe all of this enormous tragedy and trauma that you've gone through, maybe there's a greater purpose in it, because this
industry, this is way bigger than Diddy. It's way bigger than any of the individual players. It's way bigger than Motown Records, Chalice Records, Lucian Grange. It's way bigger than that. And I would also say, pray for little Rod that he could get himself restored, refreshed. And brother, I can understand why a promise or a talented musician doesn't feel like they have anywhere to go, because you look at the Christian scene today and it's not that promising. But you know what? Maybe God, little Rod, maybe God will open some doors, and maybe you can blaze a trail that nobody's ever gone down before, and that nobody else can own your heart and own your talent and own your soul. Those are just my thoughts. So would you do me a favor, folks? If you can help us out with any kind of a donation, that's certainly appreciated at ohioforfreedom.com. But more importantly, please share this and get this message out. And then next time that we get into this subject, we're going to talk about 3-letter agency connections. We're going to talk about politicians connected. We're going to talk about preachers connected. We're going to talk about the whole Illuminati thing, where young aspiring talent is groomed, and then they have to sell their soul to get into the next level of exposure, and what that means, and the spiritual dynamics of how that works. And folks, I would just encourage you, pray that full exposure on this case happens, and pray that this subject matter breaks out of the channel and that mainstream media wants to ignore, and it breaks out of the hip hop echo chamber. And hopefully and I believe this is the Lord's intent, and I believe that it'll happen. I believe that mainstream America is in for a rude awakening. We have been supporting this stuff. We clap and cheer when this is what's on display at our halftime show for the Super Bowl, and on and on and on it goes. But I think I've said everything. I think I've put it on the table. And I just saw Debbie weighed in. I'm going to read your comment. People need to read the Bible. God will give you the strength to see this evil. I agree. And then, Debbie, I'll just say there's a verse in, Debbie's on a roll. Babylon is about to fall. Dear, that's what I'm saying. I believe that. That's the Lord's intent. That's what we're calling this, the P. Diddy Prophecies. And I'd encourage you, Ephesians chapter 3, verse 10 says that the Lord's intent was that now, and now is always now to the principalities and powers in the heavenly realms might be made known by the church. And the word is ecclesia, by the true church, the manifold wisdom of God. And so it is the responsibility of the ecclesia to inform these principalities. Your show is over. Now, mainstream Christianity doesn't know anything about what I just said, and I'm just being candid here. But the ecclesia knows, and we're starting to know more and more and more. And we got to call these strongholds down and rescue the generation that they've corrupted. Okay, thanks everybody for weighing in. Please like, please share, please subscribe, and wait for the next episode, because it's going to be extremely informative. So until next time, and join us in these 40 days of prayer during the interval between the eclipse, which was absolutely magnificent, and Pentecost. And I'm telling you, if you'll just set aside some time every day and pray for the church in America and pray for America, you will be benefited by that. Until next time, God bless you. God bless your family. God bless the state of Ohio, which hosted some of the best eclipse viewing in the world. And God bless the United States of America. Thank you so much, folks. Have a good night.
I hear the sweet sound of freedom.